All right. Jai Baba friends, I'm glad you're with us today. We have Arsenio Rodriguez with us, who has a wonderful story of how he came to Baba, and more to come. He's a poet. He is a beloved and well-known member of our community, and we are honored to have you, Arsenio. Thank you very much for joining us. And uh, if you would start by telling us your story, that would be great.
Yes, I like to be. I'm embarrassed for what you said. But even my mother thought like that about me. And I myself don't think about me like that. I'm just a lucky guy who bumped into this gentleman who, gentle God or whatever you want to call him, I don't know. I've never been able to recover yet from the fact that I connected with Meherabad, that Meherabad fished me out of the world that I was into. But you want me to tell you the story of how it happened? I try to be quick.
Take your time.
I was born in Puerto Rico in 1943. That's 82 years ago. And Catholic family, very nice mother, father. I guess 3 years and a half, something happened in my life. They gave me a little dog, fox terrier, and as a gift. And this is my first memory of life. And not this one, but the fox terrier, they tied him up in a little porch. It was a ranch type house. And when I went to see him in the morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I was so excited about my little puppy. And he tried to jump the little thing, and I found him hanging up, his eyes all out, blood coming from his mouth, dead. So I was in tears and panic, and I didn't know what that was. I was just starting to live, and I discovered death. So I asked my mother, "What is this?" And she said, "Because things die." And I asked her because at that time I said to her, "Are you and my father also going to die?" I said, "Everybody dies." So from that day on, the next 6 months, I would run into their room for them early in the morning to check out whether they were still alive or not. So I'm sure I ruined their romantic life. So I was walking to see whether they were. Well, anyhow. So I grew up as a Catholic. My mother was a very Catholic lady. And I always felt that, amongst my invisible friends, there was a guy named Jesus, who is the guy that they were talking to me in school. And he gave me a lot of good feelings in my life. Actually, I used to walk to school about a mile and a half. And then when I was walking to school, I felt that the breeze in the Caribbean, I knew I was in Puerto Rico, so there was always that breeze. I felt that breeze was my invisible friend taking me by the hand. And I felt many things like that, weird things, like I felt that I was a little man living in here, and that I was like looking like a periscope looking at life. I became an altar boy. I wanted to be a priest. But then I started discovering about hell and heaven. Hell particularly was a bad thing for me because I knew I was going to go there with all my, particularly when I started growing up and noticing other people, particularly those of the opposite gender. I said, I'm definitely going to go to hell, definitely going to go to hell. So what happened is that because of that experience, I was a very shy, inward person. And I had a friend, my best friend, who was my neighbor, was an atheist. And he gave me books. I'm talking now about 12, 13 years of age, still a Catholic. I also remember one thing. once I was chosen as an altar boy to lead the procession. There was always a procession. It happened in all Latin countries, but particularly in Puerto Rico, that's where I was growing up, on Good Friday. And I was the altar boy. Was dressed, instead of my red and white, it was in black and white. And I was carrying the cross in front of the procession to this neighborhood. And I thought in my mind, talking to someone that I didn't know, why is it that you had to live 2,000 years ago? I would like love to met you. That thought was there. But then, the friends, my friend, the 80s, books, Bertrand Russell, Sartre, all of those things, I was kind of reading into those things. I would ask questions from the priest about the Indians and the Chinese. And he said, what happened to them? They were born before Christ. Or they told me they were going to limbo. All of those many things that I could not understand. So one day I took a little book from my mother, which was a book from a great Christian mystic of the Middle Ages, I think. His name was Thomas A. Kempis. A little book with little meditations. And I went to the park in my neighborhood. I was 13 years old. And I went to the park in my neighborhood and I prayed for God to give me a sign. A little angel with a trumpet, a little bush on fire, something to show me that he was really real and not like Santa Claus, which I already had been disappointed, because Santa Claus also was being told to me, and I realized that it was my parents putting gifts under the tree. No answer. So I thought, well, if God exists and he doesn't answer, a little kid. And I was being very strong about so honest about my prayer. There's no such thing. So I became, at that time, 13 years and a half, I became an agnostic or atheist. I don't know what the definition exactly was. And I'm very much interested in science, a rationalist, totally boring, I think, for my poor people, mother, girlfriends, was a boring guy, always thinking about rationality. Now I am one point in time in my life again. I'm now in Mexico City. It is 1967. I have a scholarship from the Organization of American States. I'm studying a graduate program in immunology and biochemistry. I go to this institute, the Polytechnic Institute in Mexico, which is near a train station. And I hear this whistle, this train whistle, as I went walking. And I don't know why. I stopped. It touched my heart. It broke me. I sat down on a bench and tears came to my eyes. And I sat down and I missed my class. And I don't know why. I went back home and everything went like that. This was 1967. But in 1969, time has passed now. I'm married with a child. I'm 27 years old. I'm no longer not part of the hippie movement. But somehow in my life, I happened to be given a mescaline pill. And somebody told me that it was just nice. I didn't know, I was depressed. My life was kind of, I still would be holding to my rationalist ideas, but I could not understand the stars. There were so many and so beautiful. The universe was unexplainable with all the theories that they said. The magic I could not explain. So that day I took this mescaline with my then wife, which is now, she died. And wow, I saw many things, but amongst the things that I saw was this face of this man who I thought was Jesus, because I remember telling my wife at that time, I know now why Jesus was talking like what he was talking, because he was always saying this like that. Everything was a continuum. Everything was the same. It was a joyful thing. Everything was explained. Everything. I don't know how to explain. I don't know how it works. It was a sense of being. Now, of course, that effect passed by. I became now more depressed because I wanted to go back there, but I couldn't. I tried the mescaline again, and it just brought me down. So I stopped taking it. So back now in 1970, I'm in Miami, and I'm studying marine biology. I'm very, very depressed. I go to my neighbor's house and to get something for him. And he said, yeah, sure. And he goes to it was a studio, little cottage. And he had a poster of Meherabad in his living room that said, the new life I bring will live, it's a new life poster, will live by itself eternally. I was intrigued by what statement. And then the face, he was holding his chin like that. I mean, but I didn't say anything. I went back. Next week that I came back asking for something else, this man, I said, I said, sure, let me get you what you want. And I went to look for the poster, and there was now a Che Guevara poster. And I said, what happened with the poster of that man you had here? He said, oh no, it didn't fit with my decor. So I took it away. So his poster didn't mean anything for him. But he said, but if you're interested, they gave me, when I bought that poster, they gave me this thing. And he gave me a photograph of Ben Baba, of the ancient one, printed in a sort of pinkish paper. And it was the same face that I had seen with my head mescaline trip. And I remember I started looking at it, and it said, his eyes were incredible, and it said, I'm the one that so many seek and so few find. And do not try to understand me. My depth is unfathomable. Just love me. And if you cannot love me, don't worry. I'll be loving you. That took me out. So I did my next thing was to drop out from school, or stop going to school. Went back to him, told him, where did you get this thing? It was at a bookstore in North Miami. It was rush hour. My wife was very angry. I said, we have to go. This guy might die. I need to meet this guy. So I went there and I got all of the books, discourses, thought speaks, everything that I could afford and they had there. Went back, and for 3 weeks I only did nothing but reading those books. And every question that I asked my priest before the 13, before becoming an atheist, was answered there. And I said, yeah, but what? And turn the page, bah, the answer was there. So now in my rational mind, I said, he's either, when I started, I said, he's either a charlatan, because not everybody goes outside and says, I am God in human form. So he's a charlatan, or he is crazy, or he's telling the truth. And the craziness went away immediately because of the logic of the things and the questions that I had were all answered. So I said, well, he might be looking for, recognition, power, things like that happen in life. So I said, I need to meet him. So I called, at that time there was a woman called Betty Wright, and I think Ronnie knows her, knew her. She died now. And I called her, she was running in charge of the bookstore, and I said, Betty, where can I meet this guy? And she said, the first time I heard that, she said, didn't you know that he dropped his body? Which I didn't know what it meant. I never heard the expression dropping the body before. So he had died. Oh. So I was very depressed. But then I thought, well, charlatans usually are surrounded by charlatans. So maybe there's somebody that met him that I can meet. So I called her again and I said, Betty, is there anybody that met Nehebaba? And I said to her specifically, Not for 1 hour, not for one moment, not for somebody that met him for a long time. Somebody who was a close associate of him. And she said, yes, well, there are these two women in Myrtle Beach, Elizabeth and Kitty. You can go there and stay there. So I came. I came here with my wife and my daughter, who was 3 years old. I went to the old gateway, 1970 summer going to autumn. I walked in. Jane Haynes was sitting in the chair. My little girl, well, that time was 3 years old. She was scared of elder people because I was such a boring guy. Besides being rationalist, I was also pro-independence movement in Puerto Rico. I was very much a political guy. I didn't like Americans. I'm sorry about this thing, which is why I was in Mexico studying. And so I was a particularly boring and aggressive person. And so my little daughter, when she went to the supermarket with my wife, Conchi, and the lady would approach her because she was a sweet girl and do some endearment talk, she would start weeping and run towards the mother and grabbed her skirt. She was so shy. We walked into the gateway, the old gateway, and Jane was sitting behind the desk and she was busy, so we waited. And then she looked up and she went to my daughter and she said, and you're going to come and give me a hug and kiss me? And my daughter just ran into Jane's arms and they embraced. And they embraced, and they were actually, both of them were sobbing. And then my wife started to sob. And then macho men, at least in my culture at that time, they don't weep. So I didn't know what to do. So I opened the screen door and I went outside, and the whole thing, forget about the mescaline, the whole thing, the whole center was inside me. Birds were singing in my brain, trees were inside my brain. And in the middle of all that, and I don't ask me why, because this is just a story. In the middle of my brain, I heard. You remember that night in the park? That was 13 years, 14 years ago. They might have been very busy, but he said, this is your sign. This is your sign. I sat down, I was so moved, I sat down. And I replied, it's the only conversation I ever had with Meherabad, this sense of being. And I said, you are my master. What do you want from me? And he said, I only want you to be who you really are. And I said, but who am I? And he laughed. I've never seen her laughter like that. And he laughed and he said, that's for me to know and for you to find out. And that day, I became a Babaloor. So that's my story. I've never had any conversation like that with anybody. It was the deepest thing that I've ever heard. Now, just to add a little compliment to that, I was in 1970. The first time I had any money to go to India was in 1974. By that time, I already had a job. I was working with the government. I was an assistant to a secretary of government. So I learned protocol. And then when I was going to India, and I heard about Eruch, and Eruch is the chief of cabinet. He's the chief of staff. So I approached him in Meherabad first time, and I go to him. I remember his face, and I extended my hand like that because everybody was embracing him, but I felt that I didn't know him, and I was this chief of, you embrace the chief of staff. So I said, Mr. Yesawala, very properly, it is a privilege meeting you. And he looked at me, and you must have remembered, Eruch's face was incredible. He looked at me with a face of total disbelief. He said, this is, this is incredible that somebody said something like that. So he pulled my hand and he said, you know, I lived with him for 40 years. And he took me to the entrance of Mandali Hall and he said, I used to sit there, he used to sit here. And I would turn to him, I would translate his gestures, I would bring him tea, I would sweep his sweat, you know, cleaning his face. But I was watching the clock for that time in which I could go out and smoke my bidi. I took him for granted. He said, and now you and all these people are traveling 10,000 miles and you never met him. Sir, he said to me, it is a privilege meeting you. And he pulled me like that and he embraced me and I melted him in his arms. And that was I think, I don't know. I've never met anybody like that. Physically, I've never met anybody. But to end the story about that train whistle in Mexico, the first time that I went to India, that same time that I met Eruch, before meeting Eruch, I was with a person that had been to India before, and we stayed at the East West Hotel in Ahmednagar. And he said, we should go to the tomb early in the morning. So let's start walking from the East West Hotel. I don't know if anybody of you know where it was, but it was sort of like the entrance of the road that leads to Meherabad. So we started walking at 4:30 in the morning. I've never been to India before. And of course, that was a very narrow road then, and there was nothing else except tongas and those crazy trucks that have Indus symbols behind and please horn. Horn is okay. And very loud, honking their horn. Like that. So we were in that road walking, and I remember that finally he said, we are going to be there late. We should hitchhike. And I said, hitchhike? And so I don't know how he did it, but hitchhike this made a sign like that, and one of these trucks stopped. And it was a truck with probably about 6 people in the cabin. There were 6 people in the cabin. There was no room. And he said, we go to Meherabad. It's in English. They didn't speak English. They answered in Indian. So we jumped into the cabin and sat in their laps. And 10 minutes after they stopped and said, so we say thank you in Spanish and in English. And they say, so we go up. Mansari is coming out of the tomb with I think the flowers and some clothes. And she said, you wait here. She knew him because he had been there before. Take care of this place. I'm going to back quickly. It was not, yeah. So I went in. I didn't know what to do. He bowed down because he had been there before. I didn't know that custom. So I just squatted in the front of the tomb. And again, I felt the same thing that I felt at the center. And I don't know what happened. I just was asking there, Mayor Baba, I want to do some service for you. I want to do something for you. And I was squatting. And right at that moment, I hear a little voice. And I opened my eyes. And the eyes, although I was squatting, the eyes of Mansari were looking straight into my eyes. She was standing up and she had a broom in her hand. And she said, could you help me sweep the tomb? And I did. But when I went out, after that, and I leaned in one of the columns of that shed outside, looking at the morning, foggy morning, and I heard a train whistle. You know, the train that passed by. I heard that train whistle and I started to weep. And it was the same pitch of the train whistle that I heard in Mexico in 1967. And that's it. That's my story. How do you, I don't, I read many things about Meherabad, being in India 37 times. I met many people. And this guy, Ronnie, I met for a long time in Miami. I found beautiful stories. I know that everybody, what I cannot understand still is the sweetness of how this being touches our hearts. No matter who we are, no matter who we think we are, no matter whether we think we are good or bad or whatever. I was not a seeker. I was not, I was just a very depressed young man with ideas of self-importance in my mind. How this happened, I don't know. The last thing that I must tell you, and it is an aside, but it's important, and I take 5 minutes for that, is that before, in 1969, at the beginning of 1969, my mother, who was a woman that suffered a great deal, and she was a very sweet lady, and she stopped. She was working. Uh, she stopped at my house. I lived in this apartment, uh, and she was using public transportation. So she stopped, and my then brother-in-law is also dead now. Was there, so decided to give her a ride to her house in his car. And in the car, she said, "You know, son, I had a very interesting dream last night." And I said, "What kind of a dream?" "I don't know. I've never gone out of Puerto Rico, but this is a very strange dream. I was in the Orient, and there was I've never been, but I imagine like that. There was a man in a green motorcycle that was sort of like serving as my guide, and he took me to this place where there was a procession led by a woman, was a very beautiful woman. And when the woman saw me looking at her, she put her hands like that. She looked into my eyes and she looked up. And when I looked up, there was a man in a white winged horse with a sword in his hand climbing the clouds. She asked me, of all people, "What do you think about this dream?" I was a cynical guy at that time. I knew my mother was very spiritual and religious and things. So I said, "Oh, that's a biblical dream. Definitely, it's a biblical dream." So time passed by. Meherabad comes to my life. In 1974, when this first time that I go to India, I had enough money from that consultancy that I did that I decided to invite her. And she went with me. So we are now in the car with my brother-in-law, ex-brother-in-law, and we are in the taxi from Bombay. Uh, and we had called earlier, and somebody was going to meet us in a roundabout to guide us. This is now 5 years after. And I mean, so now this man starts shouting in the roundabout, "Jai Baba! Jai Baba! Jai Baba!" And it was Jalda Stool, who were at that time a green umbrella. Oh, my mother also saw this man. He was very dark, but he was not an African American, but he was very dark skinned, who was guiding me. She said to me and my brother-in-law who were sharing the taxi, "That's the man in my dream." I had forgotten the dream, but not my brother-in-law, if he remembered me. And then we went to Meherabad. We arrived in Meherabad, and after my meeting with Eruch, money came out, and he said, my mother's name was Lolita, and she said, "Mehera is waiting for you." So I accompanied my mother, who was not very fluent in English, and I accompanied her to Mera's porch. And as we were walking, Mera was sitting, and Mera, when saw my mother, she stood up and she went like that. Okay, yay, baba, or namaste, whatever. And my mother told me she's the woman that was leading the procession. And then Mera came down the steps of the porch, embraced my mother, and said to her, who was very, very Christian Catholic, and said to her, he is the Christ, you know. He doesn't have to come in any religion. And he took her by the arm inside the living room of their house. And there was a painting, I don't know if it's still there, but it was there then, of Meherabad in the clouds, in a white winged horse, with a sword in his hand, climbing. So that was the story of my mother. Who later on, at the end of that stay there, which was 2 weeks, I was coming down with her from the tomb, and it was dark. At that time, still there was no electricity. So I was carrying one of those lanterns, and she was scared because she had read that there were cobras and scorpions in India. So she was very close to me. And as she was very close to me, she whispered in my ear, you know, my son, I felt in my heart that he's the same. But in my mind, I cannot reconcile it. It's been so many years, 70 years. So I cannot reconcile it in my mind, but I felt it in my heart that it's the same. So I told her the story about which I have read, about the woman that met Baba in London, who was the daughter of a minister. And Baba said, because she was weeping, why do you weep? And she said, because you can feel this love around you, but I am a Christian. I am the daughter of a minister. And Baba said, love Christ. And everything comes to me. Love Christ is the same. I'm the same. So I told her that story. She was happy. Then we went to Bilu. We stayed at Bilu's, and we were leaving early in the morning. And she started packing, and she was very philosophical. And she put her shoes upside down in the suitcase. And then she saw something. I just, what is this here? Look. And there was in the shoe, there was a very clear, I still, next time I can share with you all, very clear edging of the sole of the shoe with a Baba New Life image. And she showed it to Amred, and Amred Bilu came, and everybody saw it. And then she said, let us see what's in the other shoe. And we went to the other shoe, and in the other shoe, there was a face of Jesus Christ. But it was almost like if a Greco had painted it. You couldn't even see still see the crown of thorns on the forehead. She said to me and to all of those there, because she had been shown the tree in the tree by Mera, she had been shown so many faces of Baba. So she said, I'm not surprised about the fact that there's a face in the shoes. What I am surprised and amazed is the answer that he gave me to my worry. That, you know, in one shoe I am Meherabad, and the other one is Jesus. It's the same thing. And for her, which when I went to Puerto Rico during my life to see her, she had, of course, photographs of Meherabad, and she also had the Sacred Heart of Jesus things that she had. And I used to joke with her, saying, you are betting, you are very smart, you are betting on all tables, just like they do in Las Vegas, you're betting on all tables. And she would laugh. Those shoes, of course, I took them to India. They kept them in that museum that Bagnatu maintained for a while. I brought them back. I still can see those faces. But for me, they were just like just so sweet how these things happen. The people were absolutely like we all are, normal, strange people with all our goods and bads inside. The sweetness of Meherabad is that every story that I've heard, and I've heard many stories, although I forgot all of them, it's unique. It's fantastic. It's so touching. It's so personal. It's something that cannot be described. Yeah, Ivan, that's my story, Betty, and the rest. That's my story.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Arsenio. I know I read that story of your mother so many years ago in Baal's book about the shoes, the images on the shoes. Thank you for repeating it. I wonder now, you were in Puerto Rico. Did you do Baba work in Puerto Rico before you came to?
Yes, actually, when we left, I left Miami. I was in Miami until 1972. And then I went back to Puerto Rico and we opened a bookstore, Baba Bookstore, uh, in my, at that time, father-in-law's building. Actually, Bill Stevens, when visiting us there, Booker was there, but I think we have closed the bookstore by the time he was there. And yeah, many people, I think that probably a large group of 50 or more people did come to know about Baba.
Wow.
And Bauji was there at some point, Bukar was there, Jalan Dori were there. Yeah, so there was a flow, and I really never know why, but there was a lot of interest in Meher in Puerto Rico. And well, you never know why at all. But it was, yeah, that's all big deal I did. And I also translated some of these messages in Spanish and reviewed the translation of the discourses that what's his name, Don Stevens did with a Spanish gentleman, so that it was more into the Spanish that is speaking in Latin America and not that the Spanish that they speak in Spain. It's the same, but there's a different kind of a pronunciation, etc. Use of the words. So yeah, that's what we did.
Um, I wondered, you talked about Pukar last time in the other meeting, but can you say again how you connected with Pukar? Did you go to Hamirpur?
No, no. I don't even know. I think that, as I mentioned last time, I think it was Bill Stevens that alerted me that Booker was in Miami, I think in Florida, and when the group decided to invite him, and he came. And we were really impressed. His visit was great because, as I told last time, we met with a large group of people. I think he gave a lot of energy to the movement in Puerto Rico at that time. Many people came to the meeting. Probably, I don't know, near 100 people came to hear him speak.
Wow. And he stayed with you for a week?
Hey,
Yeah.
with us,
Yeah.
like,
Would you tell again about your neighbor? I
well, the neighbor that came out, which we had never actually met, but she was a neighbor, and she bowed down to him, and he then bowed down to her. And then the neighbor said to us, but not angry, but in disbelief, she said, how can you bring a saint and not tell your neighbors about it? Saw something special in. We never spoken to that neighbor. But that, of course, Pukar, I mean, I don't know, this is not Puca in California, which at that time you must have seen lots of people, well, not lots, but people that there was. This is Puerto Rico, you know, it's a very provincial place at that time. So this is a guy that comes there dressed with his Indian garb, with that size, that color, and that look of far away in his eyes. He was special for the people passing by. He would not pass by unnoticed.
Now you told me that later on, your job required travel so that you went many times. Is that right, to India?
Yeah, I worked for the United Nations for something years, and in the environment field. And the United Nations Environmental Programs headquarters is in Nairobi, which is East Africa. And then from Nairobi to Bombay is only 5 hour flight. So, and I was living in either Mexico or Geneva. So it was very easy for me then to go. And not only that, but at some point in time, Vilus, I can't remember his name, but Vilus' daughter was married to this guy who was the manager of Air India in Nairobi. So we would always put me on first class. And I would go and have the dinner with them. And then he would book me to India. And it was either cheap or very or free. And so, but I would only go for 2 days for the weekend. Because I think sometimes I would say a week if I had vacations, but most of the time I only would go for 3 days. So I did go many times. Sometimes I had to go to conferences in Goa. So again, I would skip and go there. So yeah, I was lucky. I didn't have the opportunity of, like some of you might have had, of staying in India for 3 weeks or something like that. But except the first time that I did go for 2 weeks. But I did go many times.
Mhm. So they were used to you coming and going. Yeah.
Yeah. Eruch would say to me, "This is hello or goodbye."
Uh,
Yeah. You know, actually, one thing did happen. I tell you this short thing. I came for the shortest time I was in India was for 2 nights on Amartiti. And that time, what was her name? The woman from the Hurricane was Ana Rosa. Ana Rosa was showing some films or slides of the screen on that Coliseum outside in front of Baba's tomb. I arrived almost there for that night. The mandali where the mayor was there, sitting there. I was sitting in the outside rim of that place. Eruch was close to me, and then when the thing ended, I decided to go and say hello and goodbye to Mera because I was not even going to see her. So I went down to her, and of course, Meru was sort of like in karate position like that because it was a crowd. she, she didn't allow anybody to come in. But I approached Mera and I said, "Oh," and she saw me and she smiled. And I said, "Oh, you're here," she said. "And yes, but I'm leaving tomorrow. So I just wanted to say hello and goodbye." To her, I said that. Oh, she said to me, and in her voice, I before you go, I need to tell you 3 stories. But at the same time that she said that, Meru said to her something in Gujarati, which I don't know what it was, but with a very stern face. "I don't want to cannot do that. You cannot tell 3 stories in that crowd here." But she did. She told me 3 stories. You will not believe it. I never forget that night. There was a full moon. Besides that, there was a full moon. I was standing there the crowd was around, and she was telling me these three stories in Meherazad speed, which was like, and she closed her eyes, and she would go like that, she closed her eyes. I don't know what the stories were, but she told me, and that I not forget. She said, "You may not remember the stories," which I don't, "but never forget the moral of the stories. Meherabad is God." That's I got it. Yeah, I got it. That's what she said. That's so beautiful. I never forget that night.
I'm wondering if anybody in the audience might have a question for Arsenio. When did you move to Myrtle Beach, Arsenio?
2004. Alan, great. I know you. You're the one who put me into this group.
Yeah.
You can blame it all on me.
I was going to pass incognito. Except when, for you and Ronnie. It's so beautiful to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity of asking me to share these things, because when I share them, I remember them. And sometimes at this time of my life, I need to remember things like that, because they make me feel that this guy is always with me.
Yeah.
And that's so beautiful.
Now, you've written a couple of books of poetry, yeah?
Poetry, yes, it's one thing that I inherited from my mother, and I love to do. I like to write. I mean, I like to write, but the poetry comes naturally. Yeah, I love it. I mean, but I mean, it's not just for myself, but I put some books out just because people ask me. But yeah, I do that. It's
You write,
like my notes in my diary about my experiences.
do you write in or think in Spanish or English?
Mostly in English and also in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly in English. And I tell you why. For some time, uh, the person who initiated me into this, I worked 6 years with Deepak Chopra in some sort of program. After I retired from the UN, he invited me to help him in doing something that was called Alliance for a New Humanity. I like that idea, so I worked with him. And one day, I think, talking with him, he said, and show him one of the things that I had written. And he said, "Why don't you publish this?" And I said, "Well, I just write this for myself." And he said, "If you publish it, I will write the foreword." And I said, "Well, if you write the foreword, I might sell 2 books. If you don't write the foreword, I will not sell one." So I did. He was very gentle, and he wrote this foreword. And this was my first book. And then I discovered self-publishing, which means that anybody can publish a book. And I keep them just to give them as gifts to my friends and my family. Some of them don't like it, but they don't dare to say me anything. And I feel that I can leave something about this imaginary book. And most of these poems are inspired by these experiences that I have felt inside, that sense of being that was awakened by Baba somehow. I don't know how. I can tell you, don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. Not even my wife. Not even probably myself. The kind of person that I am inside. So this is an amazing thing to me that I have been exposed to people like you, more so to people like Eruch, and even more so, Baba. It's like there has to be something so beautiful in life. And I mean, I understand, of course, and I also can be a good intellectual. I've read God Speaks, and I understand all of the mental stuff. But what impresses me the most is the heart stuff. Touching of the heart is amazing. The mental stuff is okay. But the heart is incredible. So, like I said, having this opportunity of sharing this with you, who I know, instead of me talking so much, you should be telling me your stories. Because it is like so special. That's what I did in breakfast time at the Pilgrim Center, was sit down there and have my tea and interview somebody. And there was always something, wow, man. You know the one, I tell you very quickly, the one that blew my mind? One day in these 2 days that I was there, this guy comes in, Eruch asked him, come and tell you this story. This guy, I don't remember his name, tall fellow, hippish looking guy. He was running the bicycle through India. And he was going from Aurangabad to Pune. And he took that road that passes in front of the Meherabad road. And he was biking and he had a flat tire. So he was in a terrible situation. So the tire started looking around, and the people who were there, the peasants who were there, they started pointing him to Meherabad. They thought he's blonde, long hair, hippish, Babylon. He's a Babylon. They were pointing, go. So he walked in with his bike, followed them. There was nobody there. The mandali were at the cross. Aro was doing some of his stuff in the near villages. So the servant said, well, this is probably somebody that's coming in a special meeting with one of the mandali. So they pointed to where the water was. So he said, this is a fantastic place. So he put the bicycle upside down, had a drink of water, and then the car from the trust office comes, and Eruch sits out, and he looks at this blonde guy with glasses. Don't they know? He took the car, he went to him and said, what are you doing here? It's not visiting hours. It's visiting hours if it was a visit, it's not even a visiting day. And he was startled, and he said, where am I? And Eruch realized, and he said, you don't know where you are? No, I just, the best people showed me and pointed me. Oh, come with me. I'll tell you where you are. So he took him by the hand, and they went inside Mandali Hall, and Eruch told him about Mandali Hall. And he said, this is the guy telling this story. I've been here for 6 months now. And I sorted out the problem with my flat tire. But the hole that I had in my heart is still open. I'm trying to keep that. I will not leave until that is healed. So that's the story I heard, and I said, oh boy. That one I've never heard before. Oh boy. Do you imagine the coincidence?
That's Paul Williams that you met.
We know him.
Yeah, we know him. And when he tells that story, of course, it goes on for about an hour, but it's beautiful. And I'm glad to know that, I don't think I ever met anybody that actually, well, I guess I did meet some people that had, connected with him there, but it's cool that you met him.
Where is he from, Ronnie? Where is he from? Where is he?
Well, he used to live where I live now in Mariposa, California. That's one of the places he lived. He also lived in the Bay Area when I lived there for a while, but now he lives in Australia.
Oh my God.
You
Yeah.
came from Santa Barbara originally, then to Colorado. So many of us left him out west. Yeah.
Great story. Great story. And I loved your story, Arsenio. You told it so beautifully. So many things. It was just perfect. I mean, of course, Baba wrote it, but I'm glad that you were able to experience it and tell it. So beautiful.
And as I said, it's not so much, I mean, I don't record it. What is really amazing to me is the impression it made in my heart. I mean, when that guy was telling that story, I was in tears. I said, my God, what is this? I said, but there are so many stories like that. It's incredible.
I love when I heard you tell a story of Asfandiar Basali one time at the center. You told his story. Asfandiar Basali from Iran.
I don't think so.
You don't
But
think so? Remember? Well, I'm pretty sure it was the story where he talked to his cherry trees.
no,
That
no,
wasn't you?
no,
Oh my
no.
God.
I never met him. I never met him. I never know people who have met him very closely.
Yeah.
We know that
Well,
story.
maybe it was a different story. I could have sworn it was that story. Isn't that funny? Well,
We are approaching time for the next meeting, just to let you know. We have a couple minutes, 4 minutes actually. So just let you know we'll be wrapping it up. This has been wonderful, Arsenio. Oh, and such fun to hear Paul's story through your through your eyes. We know Paul. We've heard that story. And he will hear it. We'll send him the video for sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm happy that you're all there. And
Thank you.
otherwise, what a beautiful thing that we can share this, because sharing means that we can only share this because it's like tasting wine. Only people who have drank wine know the taste of wine.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Arsenio. And Betty, thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thanks you. So yes, we will talk about when the next folks listening, just look at the calendar. I'm not sure if we'll firm up the next meeting. It's either next week or the following. Um, sorry, I don't have it clear yet, but yeah, if you feel like you've got more stories, we would like to hear them for sure. All right.
At your disposal.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you. And maybe we could all say together, Jai Avatar, Meher Baba.
Okay.
Jai Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Avatar.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Thank you, dear Baba, for a wonderful, wonderful time. Thank you, Arsenio, so much for joining us. Okay, but uh, I'm gonna turn off the recording and then we'll be turning it on again pretty quick for the next go round, which is Gil Alvarado's